I'm John Moulis. You might remember me from my various YouTube videos over the years on such diverse subjects as karaoke videos, politics, my reminiscences of Phillip College in Canberra, and the other videos that I've done. I'd like to in this series of videos, I'd like to revisit a subject I touched on previously. That is the bullying and harassment I received at the Department of Defence in Canberra. I'm not going to go over Department of Defence because that's already been done. I might revisit the subject in future videos because there's still a lot of stuff that I haven't covered from those videos. But I'd like to revisit the subject of workplace bullying in general. Now, those videos I did about the Department of Defence sparked a parliamentary inquiry into workplace bullying, and new laws have been brought in about workplace bullying, largely as a result of those videos that I did 2 years ago. But it isn't a new problem. In fact, it's a very old problem. It's been going on for many years, and nobody ever really said anything about it because it was just regarded as being normal workplace behaviour. It was regarded as being a normal thing. You were a young worker, and you were there with older blokes, and you were just the victim of this. It just naturally happened, and nobody ever said anything over the years, and no one did anything about it because it was just regarded as normal workplace behaviour, like an initiation into a club or something like that. It happened to me. That wasn't the first time that it happened to me at Department of Defence in 1990-91. It did happen to me when I was much younger, when I just left school and started in the workforce, again in the public service. Now, a lot of people don't regard the public service as being a hotbed of workplace bullying. People have this idea of the public service as being a structured workforce of white collar, and that bullying only happens in sort of the more uncouth blue collar jobs. But it happened there to me in the public service in 1978 as an 18-year-old, and it just kept on happening. I mean, it started at a very young age, and it just followed me around wherever I went in the workforce, in every job that I did, just about every job that I did, and it never really went away. I mean, I just considered it to be natural behaviour, and I never said anything about it. It was like discrimination. For years, people did it. They didn't think it was anything out of the ordinary. They didn't know that it was discrimination. They were just doing it as normal behaviour and didn't think anything about it. They didn't think of the consequences it was having on the victim, the recipient, and they just went ahead and kept on doing it. And of course the victim never said anything, and when the victim did try to do something about it, their complaints were laughed off, in many cases laughed off by the bosses. I mean, that certainly happened to me in the public service in 1978. You know, they just laughed off the stories of bullying that I came up to them about, you know. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. I'd better give you a bit of background before I go into the subject more in depth. Now, I did my full 12 years of school. I finished year 12 because my parents wouldn't allow me to leave school before then. That in our family, you know, my older brother and older sister, they both finished year 12, and that was it. It was an unwritten rule in the family that I had to finish year 12. And so I did finish year 12. I went to Phillip College in Canberra, as you know from my previous videos. And I started in the workforce literally 2 days after I finished school. I finished school on the 18th of Friday, the 18th of November 1977. I had the weekend, and then I started in the public service at the Department of Finance in Canberra on the Monday the 21st of November. I didn't have any holiday. I didn't have any final vacation from school. I didn't have a gap year. I just went straight from school into the public service. I suppose, looking back now with the hindsight of almost 40 years, I can now see that was a stupid thing to do, that I should have taken a gap year, that I should have done what almost every other kid did at the time, go on the dole for a year, travel around Australia with mates, and go on the dole and live off the dole, travel around, and then come back again and start work a year later. But I didn't do that, because in 1977, that was the era where the baby boomers were leaving school. Thousands of kids were flooding the workforce looking for jobs. And in 1977, the youth unemployment crisis was massive. It was called a crisis, the youth unemployment crisis, because you had all of these kids leaving school and there were no jobs. I mean, we were still recovering from the oil shocks of the mid-1970s then, the recession of the mid-1970s, where thousands of people lost their jobs, and also at that time you had women joining the workforce, which hadn't happened before. You know, women, working mothers and that, were flooding the workforce. And I remember at the time there were a lot of newspaper articles saying, you know, that if the women got out of the workforce, there'd be stacks of jobs for young people. And back then, women were being blamed for the youth unemployment crisis, whereas it had its roots deeper than that. It was, of course, as I've explained, the baby boom, the post-war baby boom. All of these kids were finishing school and needed jobs, and we were there recovering from a recession. There just weren't the jobs there. I mean, the economy was still very much in recession in 1977, although they didn't use the term recession. It was rather strange. All of these things were happening and it wasn't labelled a recession. So what happened in my final school vacation that I had in September 1977, August-September school holidays, there was a public service test was held. I was finishing year 12, so I was eligible to go for the clerk's test, which was 3rd Division public service, where you got more money. And I also did the clerical assistance test. I mean, clerical assistant was 4th Division public service. Now, for 4th Division, there were no qualifications. You didn't need any qualifications. Anybody, regardless of education, could do the selection test, and you went straight in as soon as your name reached the top of the list. There was also another fairly strange test that I did for computer operator. I mean, that was the early days of computers, and computers were these big, massive things that took up a whole room. And I remember the selection test I did for this computer operators was bizarre. There were questions in there about what to do if you were bitten by a snake. You know, apply a tourniquet or do whatever, and there were other questions as well. Nothing whatsoever to do with computers, but we had to do this selection test. And of course, what happened, I did those 3 tests within the space of a few weeks in August, September 1977. And within a week, or in under a week, I got a telegram. I received a telegram. And for all of you young people watching this who perhaps don't know what a telegram was, I mean, this was the era before mobile phones, before the internet, before email, before anything like that. And the fastest form of written communication was a telegram. It was, you either went into a post office and wrote it in as short a space as possible. You had to abbreviate it as much as possible, a bit like a text message, and you paid the person at the post office how many, I think it was 5 cents a word or something, or 10 cents a word, and you sent this telegram. There was a transmission fee because it had to be sent by the telegraph, not the Daily Telegraph, not the newspaper. The telegraph was a Morse code generator and that sent these things down the line, and on the other end it was printed out, and you had a boy, they were called telegram boys, who delivered these telegrams to your door. And of course in later years the telegrams became a little bit more sophisticated. They called them lettergrams then. But anyway, you received one of these telegrams, and I remember within a week I received this telegram saying, phone such and such for employment. You know, and I didn't know what to do. It was from the Public Service Board. I phoned up the number to the Public Service Board, and they offered me 3 jobs. They offered me a job in, ironically, Department of Defence, Patents, Trademarks and Designs Office, and there was another job as well. And, you know, I said, look, I have to consult with my parents. I'll get back to you about it. I mean, I was keen on starting work straight away. I mean, it was great, you know, this idea of starting work and getting money and all of that. I was keen on chucking in school straight away and earning big money straight away, and that's what I wanted to do. But my parents had this obsession about me finishing year 12, getting my year 12 certificate. So I had to turn them down and go back to school and finish my final term of school. Incredibly, at secondary college, they actually called them semesters, would you believe? Even though semester includes the word semi or semi, which means 2, you know, 1 and 2. But, you know, they were so obsessed with this college business that they adopted the American terminology of a semester, even though they were still terms. There were 3 terms in a year back then. Of course, with school nowadays, it's 4 terms in a year. But anyway, so I got back to the Public Service Board and I told them and what happened, that my parents wouldn't allow me to start work straight away. And the Public Service Board, they were very lenient about it. They said, look, 1 week out from your final day of school, phone us and tell us what happened, and we'll put you back on the list and we'll offer you another job. So that's what happened in early November 1977. I remember I phoned up from school, from Phillip College, on the red phone there, the old red phone, like I said, before mobile phones or anything, and it was 20 cents, put 20 cents in the slot, and I phoned them up and I said, look, you know, I'm just over a week out from my final day of school. Could you put me back on the list for a job? And so they said, okay, we'll do that. And 2 days after I made that call, I got another telegram saying phone such and such for employment, and I phoned up and they offered me jobs again. Department of Defence again, Australian Taxation Office, and Department of Finance. And of course, I'd never heard of the Department of Finance before, but you know, I was to learn that finance was originally part of Treasury, that there was a split which happened in late 1976 by the Fraser government, the Fraser Liberal government, to try and break the power of Treasury, because Treasury was this powerful department which, you know, had become very powerful, and the Fraser government thought that by creating this Department of Finance that would break the power of Treasury. And of course it was the worst thing they could have possibly done, because instead of one extremely powerful department, they suddenly had two extremely powerful departments, Finance and Treasury. So, you know, and of course, nobody's there have been, over the years, there have been attempts to try and merge Finance and Treasury again into one department, but the politicians have just refused to do it, because they realise just how powerful it would be if you had the old Treasury back again. I mean, the ghost of people like Sir Frederick Wheeler and John Stone loom large in politics amongst the politicians, and they don't want to create that situation again. So anyway, I started in the Department of Finance on the Monday the 21st of November 1977. I still remember the exact date now, almost 40 years later. And I was in the doing photocopying. I mean, they called it the reproduction room, which was a big hoot. I mean, those were the days of Benny Hill and all of that English bawdy humour, and the reproduction room sounded like a sex orgy. But anyway, I was working there in the reproduction room, and I was doing photocopying. There was a Nashua photocopier, and that was the new one, and there were the Rank Xerox 3600 copiers as well, and these Rank Xerox machines were huge machines, and they had collating bins attached to them, and the collating bins always never worked. I mean, the pages always got caught in them. You were always unclogging paper jams all the time, and that was what I was doing all the time. There was a counter. People came to the counter, they gave copies, they gave you originals, and you copied them with the photocopiers. And I thought it was great for the first few weeks or so. It was really good. I mean, here I was, my first payday happened 4 days later on the Thursday. I went down to the pay office. I opened up the pay packet, the old pay packet with the old banknotes in it. And there were $50 notes in there and $20 notes. It was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. I thought it was fabulous. I went out and bought all these things that for years I'd put on the wish list that I'd wanted to buy. And I thought it was great. And of course, the following fortnight I got my first full pay, which was even more money, and I went out and spent that as well. And for the first few weeks, I thought it was really good, you know, it was really good. But that initial liking of it, it didn't last for very long, because after a very short time, I became disillusioned with it. It just seemed to happen as far as the seasons, because it was the start of summer and it was getting hotter. I was going to work with the sun out in the sky and everything. And I started becoming disillusioned fairly early in the piece with being in the workforce. I developed a dislike to it. But I'll go into the details of that in my next video. I mean, I've got 8 years of memories to go through in these videos, so there's a hell of a lot of material to cover. So I'll come back in the next video with all of that information. But I hope you found this particular video to be enlightening as a way of background, and I'll see you again in the next video where I'll go into it in depth. Bye.